Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Catherine Cristiano, and I have the great honor of being the chair of the Stoneleigh board. For those of you who don't know Stoneleigh, I don't know how you ended up in this room, but I love that you're here. Our mission is to improve the life outcomes of Greater Philadelphia's young people, and we do that by awarding fellowships to accomplished practitioners, researchers, organizers, policymakers, and communicators who are working to advance change within and alongside the systems that serve young people, including youth justice, child welfare, education, and health. I see that many of our current and former fellows are here today, so please stand and wave. Don't be shy, I see you. There you go. Also, any of our board members, Kathy, I see you. Wave, hello. This afternoon, we are here to celebrate and learn from our outgoing cohort of emerging leaders who completed their two-year fellowships over the course of 2023 through 2025. Our Emerging Leader Fellowship Program is designed to cultivate and elevate our next generation of social change leaders in our region. We support these exceptional change makers to complete ambitious projects with local partner organizations throughout Greater Philadelphia. Over the last 2 years, the 4 fellows that you'll hear from today all undertook projects aimed at preventing, interrupting, and reducing gun violence in Philadelphia. And the overlapping and intersecting themes and approaches across their work resulted in a unique synergy within the cohort. And this program, this topic was very particularly interesting, meaningful for me, because at the same time when this cohort started, we were had hit year 1 of the launch of the Civic Coalition to Save Lives. So over at William Penn Foundation and Philadelphia Foundation and the many other organizations involved in that citywide effort, it was amazing to watch, that rollout happening at the same time as this cohort as well. With that, I would like to hand it over to our esteemed moderator, Dr. Daniel Semenza, who is an associate professor and Stoneleigh Fellow with the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center at Rutgers University. In this role, Dan is partnering with CHOP to study how direct and indirect exposure to gun violence influences the mental health of young people in Philadelphia, including their risk for suicidal ideation and self-harm behaviors. And we are very grateful that Dan can bring his substantial expertise in this field today to our conversation with our fellows. On behalf of Stoneleigh, I'd like to thank you all for being here and for your commitment to finding solutions to the challenges facing our region's young people. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks so much, Kathy. You guys can hear me okay? Okay, cool. Okay, so good afternoon / early evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. As Kathy mentioned, my name is Dan Semenza. I am an associate professor at Rutgers University, right across the bridge in Camden. I am also in the School of Public Health there, and I'm the director of research at the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center, which is also in the School of Public Health. And as Kathy mentioned, I'm currently a Stoneleigh Fellow. I'm in my first year. I can't believe it's already been 10 months. We've been working with CHOP to collect data, and then we're setting up interviews with lots of young people about their experiences with gun violence exposure next year. So during the reception, happy to talk more about the progress on that. But today, I'm so excited to be able to be the moderator for this. I've had the pleasure of meeting the fellows and learning about their work, and I'm excited for them to be able to share their work with you all today. These projects resonate with me personally. I mean, this is the kind of work that I do on a day-to-day basis. And I am also a huge believer in the ability of projects like this to move the needle and affect change. For those of you here in Philadelphia, or if you're near me in South Jersey, you may or may not know, but shootings are down in a lot of places. We've made progress. Things are, even though television and social media don't say it, things are better in a lot of ways. But there is also so much progress to make, right? There's so much more to do. And so I think we need to keep our foot on the gas, and Stoneleigh has been a really instrumental part in being able to do that with programs like this, these fellows. So what we're gonna do is this afternoon, you're gonna hear from all 4 fellows in 2 sets of 2 presentations each. Following each set of presentations, I will ask a couple of questions to the 2 presenters, and then we'll go to the other 2, and then we'll all come together for kind of like an all-together moderated panel. One thing just on logistics, so you should have a QR code that's on the inside cover of your program. If you have questions, please scan the QR code and submit through that. That'll help it so that at the end I can kind of scroll through and read and make sure everybody gets a shot at their question. Or if you're online and you're on Zoom, there should be a link posted for you to submit questions that way. So either way, I'll have them all in front of me so everybody gets a shot, and we will answer as many as possible before the end of the session. Are y'all ready? All right, let's do it. Okay, I'd like to introduce our 4 emerging leader fellows. You can find their bios in the program, so I don't have to go through all of it. But today we have 4 esteemed fellows with us. First, we have Hanae Victoria Mason from the Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project. She is joining us virtually, so you will see her up there. Next, we have Julia Zielinski from the Cambodian Association of Greater Philadelphia. We have Oronde McClain from the Philadelphia Center for Gun Violence Reporting, and we have Franklin Moreno, who is from the Public Policy Lab at Temple University's College of Liberal Arts. So we will begin starting with Hanae now.
Hello, and good afternoon. I'm Hanae Victoria Mason. Thanks to everyone who has shown up for this in person, and sorry that I couldn't be there with you. Also, hello, and thanks to everyone who is able to join virtually, whether you're locally or wherever you are. It's great to be joining part of the virtual gang. I am home right now recovering from COVID. And so this is just a gentle reminder to, take whatever necessary precautions you need to protect yourself and others. But finally, want to also thank Stoneleigh Foundation for and the entire team for the support of this project, for supporting work like this and allowing me the opportunity to lead it. So let's get it. All right. All right, so expanding restorative justice. Expanding restorative justice in Philadelphia's youth punishment system. So I was hosted at Youth Art and Self-Empowerment Project, YAS for short, for the past 2 years. YAS has been at the forefront of ending the practice of direct FIO, which is when young people are automatically charged or sentenced as adults for certain crimes. And they have this overall mission of ending youth incarceration in general. And so they expanded that work in 2021 when they started Healing Futures. Healing Futures is Philadelphia's first youth restorative justice diversion program. It takes young people who have been referred by the district attorney's office through an extensive and comprehensive process of restorative justice diversion. And so that looks like a process of accountability, teaching them how to take personal accountability, or teaching them about personal integrity and their values, how to make better choices, how to apologize for the harm that they've caused, and preparing them to meet face-to-face with the person that they've harmed, in order for them to come up with some kind of plan for restorative and reparative action. So you might be wondering, how did I get here? I grew up most of my life in Montgomery, Alabama, where my mother was born and most of my maternal family still resides. Montgomery has this legacy, this history of both being the original capital of the Confederacy, as well as the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement. And so it was embedded in me really early on that uh, just how delicate and fraught our freedoms can be, and that it should be our life work to ensure that we maintain the freedoms and all of the progress that those who came before us fought for. My weapon has always been words, and so I was always drawn to written and visual media. That's what I pursued in college and afterwards through many different capacities in the journalism and communications world. Um, and the through line has always been that I've been looking for myself through meaningful work or finding work that allows me to fully express myself, which led me to grad school and a number of other places, but eventually to community organizing that helped me meet the healing and restorative justice practitioners who are at the heart of Healing Futures and the restorative justice world where I am now. So my approach to this project has been layered. At no point did I approach it thinking that I was a restorative justice expert, but rather somebody who was coming in to learn from, the pioneers of this work, some of the best facilitators in the country, and people who have really led the movement for restorative justice and restorative justice diversion. Um, and so my work has been to deeply immerse myself, and that's what I did for the the first year of my fellowship, in which I was a team member of Healing Futures. I learned how to facilitate a case, and I actually led and co-facilitated my own case, one of Healing Futures' most complicated and longest cases in which two young people in a conflict were both enrolled simultaneously and taken throughout the process for over a year. And this is just some of the young people that I was able to work with directly. They put together an art exhibit that premiered in February at Haverford College as part of a restorative justice symposium there. I also deeply immersed myself in other national and global models. I had the opportunity to travel to South Africa in January, where I was able to learn about the use of restorative justice for instances of mass violence, as was the case with the Post-Apartheid Truth and Reconciliation Commission and other initiatives that are still happening regarding restorative justice there. So for the report, I reached out to every single participant from the first 2 years of Healing Futures. That included the young people who were responsible, the persons harmed, their family members, support members, and community members. With a response rate of about 60% through some combination of interviews and surveys, I was able to put together what would go on to become the Healing Futures report. So with my amazing research assistant, Sonia Dow, we analyzed all of those interviews and surveys, and on September 16th, the Healing Futures report, a restorative justice response to Philadelphia's youth punishment system, was released out into the world a little over a month ago. We had our launch event at Philly Youth Basketball, which was one of our amazing community partners. We had past participants come and speak on a panel. We had our former and current program managers also speak about the history of Healing Futures. And now we have this opportunity to share what is now the first report about restorative justice diversion based in Philadelphia, and one of the first in the nation. And so the report speaks to this overwhelming kind of efficacy of the restorative justice diversion process. Its ability to produce results of low rates of recidivism, high rates of participant satisfaction, and other positive outcomes that are in juxtaposition to the traditional criminal legal proceedings or incarceration. But in addition to having that evidence and body of work that we can draw upon now, it also lays out a pathway for restorative justice to expand and to take on cases of more serious harm, particularly to start addressing cases of gun violence. You can read the report on the YAS website. There's also the QR code in the program. There might even be some copies there in person. There's also a fact sheet that you can take with you as well that has a little bit more of the findings and information on that. So here are some of the press we've already gotten around the report, as well as a really cool reposting from one of my favorite Philly-based musical artists, Tierra Whack. We are continuing to share the findings of Healing Futures and finding more opportunities to talk about just how important it is to have a report that, once again, lays the foundation for all of the amazing work that these practitioners have been doing, but also sets a precedent for what restorative justice diversion can continue to do. So a little bit about what's next for me. I will be staying on at YAS until the end of the year to continue to share the Healing Futures report, as well as continuing to do this work to expand the reach of restorative justice diversion and the type of cases that can be referred to. And then finding more ways to do more storytelling around the power of restorative justice through writing and through visual mediums. I just wanted to say thank you to a lot of organizations that have supported me and this work personally and professionally over these last 2 years. You can see a little bit of them there. There's so many people who also have supported me throughout this work. They're all listed in the report, but would love to just briefly thank my mother, who I think is on the Zoom, my sister, and so many of my other community members. Thank you.
Give us just a second here while we transition.
When I press next, does it go to the slides? They won't show up here. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Zielinski, and for the past 2 years, I've been a Stoneleigh Emerging Leader Fellow at the Cambodian Association of Greater Philadelphia, also known as CAGP. CGP stands for the Cambodian Association of Greater Philadelphia and has been around for over 46 years since 1979, serving the needs of the Cambodian and Southeast Asian community in the area of Greater Philadelphia. And our project has been addressing gun violence in and ethnic intimidation towards Philadelphia's Southeast Asian communities through our Khmer Safe and Strong initiative. Throughout this presentation, you may hear or see reference to the word Khmer, which is the language, culture, and ethnicity of Cambodia. About me, I've spent the past 9 years working with underserved communities of diverse ethnic and racial identities as an educator and in some community organizing efforts. I also have spent time living, studying, and working abroad, including in Southeast Asia, and all of this led me to CAGP, in addition to my interest in the connection between trauma healing and cycles of violence.
There we go.
Yay. Well, thank you to Stoneleigh for help today, but also thank you for funding this work and my involvement in the project. Also to the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency for their funding of this work. And thank you to CAGP for hosting me the last 2 years, and to all the staff, many of whom are here today, who poured a lot of hours and work into this project as well. When we think about gun violence, the Southeast Asian community is not often what comes to the forefront. So you might be wondering why there's an entire project focused on this community. I'm going to share briefly a little bit of history that got us to this point. This year, 2025, marks 50 years since the fall of Phnom Penh to the Khmer Rouge regime, which resulted in genocide in Cambodia. This was in part due to instability on the peninsula from the wars happening and led to displacement of many people. Some spent time in refugee camps, but eventually they resettled, and a large number resettled here in Philadelphia. As of the last census, Philadelphia has the 4th largest population of Cambodians in major US cities, and they're still here today. When resettling in Philadelphia, a lot of Cambodians were resettled in high poverty, underserved areas and continue to reside there today. And there's been a history of ethnic and racial violence towards the community from arrival to present day as well. This is in part due to harmful stereotypes such as the model minority myth, and that particular myth, along with the way that data is often reported, doesn't tend to reflect accurately their experiences of the Cambodian Southeast Asian community in Philadelphia and in the US, which often tends to differ from that of the East Asian community. If you'd like to learn more about this, there's a great docuseries by Viet Lead called Taking Root, and that can share a lot more about the history, and you can ask me about it later. But just a little bit of history as we get into today. In 2020, as gun violence rates were surging across the country, Asian hate was also exacerbated due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the history of this intergenerational trauma continues to live on today, along with ongoing roots of ethnic and racially motivated violence, including gun violence. Throughout the project, we did a series of surveys, and looking at some of the results from surveying children and adults we serve on their sense of safety, identity, and resilience, there is still a need for upstream violence prevention efforts that address ethnic and racially motivated violence and increase the supports that children have to access when feeling unsafe and to be supported to grow into individuals that value themselves and are valued in society, regardless of differences. With our adults surveyed, about half reported being worried about safety where they live and that sense of safety impacting their daily life and decision making. And though about half of them reported personally experiencing gun violence or ethnically, racially motivated violence. As you can see here, the access to resources shows low engagement. When we started this project, we looked across the city and tried to find what data was out there on experiences of violence affecting the community. And for the areas that that CAGP serves, there is very little to no data on hate crime experiences and police-reported incidents. And so as you can see, there's a high need to support the community in this. And so CAGP started our project seeking to address the gun violence, ethnic and racially motivated violence, and other forms of community violence, as well as the resulting fear and trauma through the following objectives. First, amplifying visibility and voice of the community in these issues. Second, cultivating and sharing best practices for working with the community when it comes to this work. Learning about and strengthening resource, service, and support access, and offering multi-generational programming related to these issues. Additionally, we sought to support and get our staff ready to integrate violence prevention more intentionally across the organization. These are some of the entities and resources that we engaged in the course of the work and that informed the work that we did. And these are some of the many partners that we engaged and worked with through the course of the 2 years. So I'll share now some of our project outcomes. As mentioned, we surveyed the community. We had a series of safety polls, as well as more in-depth surveys on sense of safety, identity, and resilience and joy. We had several events for stress relief, safety workshops, and as well as opportunities to have conversations around gun violence and experiences around identity. We strengthened partnerships with those in our network and new providers as well, and collated those resources into a database that's on our website that our case managers can use to refer folks to and that community members can access themselves. And we, as part of the resourcing, compiled 110 calming care kits for stress relief. And you can see an example of one of our adult care kits on the resource table here after the talks if you're interested. And here are some more photos of our engagement of the community. As mentioned, we engaged the community with polls during the course of the project, and you can see here the results from one of our safety polls, and you can check them out in more detail at the QR code up here, but it's also linked in your program booklet. For our longer surveys, these are some of the details of who we engaged and the survey process, and I want to highlight that all of our adult participants and most of our children identify as Southeast Asian. And while a little under half of the kids who participated identify as immigrant and a refugee, over 3/4 of our adults who have participated identify as such. I also want to highlight two of our survey methods. With our children, one of the things we did was take them on a walk from their school to the local park and back, taking photos of items and situations they deemed safe or unsafe. And then with our adults, we just wrapped up the survey process this past weekend with a community data talk where they got to hear the results, the initial results and findings and recommendations from our survey process and offer their feedback. Because the community that we support is often underrepresented in data, there are some special considerations we took into place. And so keeping in mind language access, education levels, being the just other challenges with being an immigrant, displaced person, or former refugee, and also considering the education levels. And so these are some of the things we did to address those challenges. You can see on the right some photos from our adult survey where we used an application that allows you to record an audio clip of the questions being asked for consistent translation. It also allows you to record participants' answers and in some cases create a starting transcript. We also used visuals, numbers, English, and Khmer for our scaled questions to address some of those different levels people might be coming in at. And like I mentioned, we put together calming care kits that were culturally responsive, age-based, and sensory-friendly to be able to respond to anything that may come up in the course of the survey, as well as making sure that we came at the survey from a trauma-informed standpoint to address anything that might come up emotionally in the course of the survey, since we were covering sensitive topics and a lot of the community members may not have previously had the chance to engage with resources. So I've shared some of the results from the survey already. Again, you can see more about that on the resource table. And so I'll share some of our key recommendations. For children, there's a strong need for supportive community, both to feel safe and as a resource, as well as upstream violence prevention forms, such as cultivating social emotional skills, and for adults who support them to be trained in modeling these skills. And for our adults, there's a need for data collection to increase awareness of the Southeast Asian community's experiences with different types of violence, support reporting incidents and resource access, and also to create more opportunities to develop trusting relationships with neighbors and normalize seeking of emotional support. Through the course of the 2 years in the project, we asked for feedback at the different events that we held, and we received a lot of positive feedback. You'll see here 2 examples of our events and safety workshops, but all of our safety workshops and events had similarly high numbers of positive engagement and people feeling that they left more informed and more confident to access resources. Additionally, with our staff, we were supporting them to be able to do this work going forward. So they participated in a long list of trainings, workshops, and conferences. And similarly, there was positive feedback around the tools, skills, knowledge that they learned, both for their own personal knowledge and support and well-being and relief of stress, but also that they felt they could share with students, clients, and community members that they support. And I'll share just one more impact. 2 years ago when we started the project, one of the first things we did was attend the Pathways for Victim Services conference, where we learned about resources for victims. And this year, a little over a month ago, we were invited back to present on the process of starting this endeavor, and especially working with immigrant and former refugees. Going forward, these are some of the initiatives that we have been working hard to plan over the past several months to continue the work in our various programs and services. And that work will continue to trickle out into the community through CAGP's many services and the communities and networks they interact with. If you're wondering how you can learn more or deepen the work, these are some suggestions. Namely, if you are in spaces of working to prevent or reduce gun violence, I invite you to be mindful of who's in the room, what voices may be missing, and to, in culturally responsive ways, reach out to invite those voices to be part of the solution. And to also be mindful of the data being collected, to work to disaggregate it, to be more holistically showing the needs of the communities in Philadelphia. And I leave you with some messages of resilience, rootedness, and power that were shared during one of our MLK events earlier this year. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to come back to ask a couple questions for Julia and Hannah, and then we will have the other 2 presenters. I have many questions for both of you, so I'm going to try and just distill, because I know we have about 10 minutes. One of the things that was really striking to me about both of your presentations is the opportunity for storytelling and narrative to kind of really get the word out and help people understand the importance of both of your topics, right? So restorative justice and social emotional learning and kind of resilience in a particular community. So I want to start with Hannah, because you explicitly called it out towards the end. How do you see kind of next steps in using narrative or storytelling to kind of get the word out more and continue the work that you've done around restorative justice in Philadelphia?
Thank you for your question, Dan. So my project was actually based in narrative change. It was not meant to be an evaluation, but because no such report or evidence existed, I knew it was important that we had those numbers and that solid foundation so that we could then do the narrative work. And so I think there are so many stories that I would have loved to include in this report, whether that's from, anecdotes from participants, whether that's, my own kind of transformation and understanding of restorative justice doing this project. Like I said, going to South Africa, there are so many different things that we haven't even scratched the surface of in terms of what we can talk about the power of restorative justice. But in order to do that, it was necessary to kind of demystify what the process even looks like, and to make sure that we had some like solid data to support it. So that's where I started, and I think it can go anywhere from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, when I talk about restorative justice in my courses, when I introduce students to the idea, most of the time they don't even know what it is. They don't know it as an alternative to kind of the standard criminal justice approach. And so I think you're right, Hanae, just getting people that basic level of education on what are we even talking about is a really important part of that narrative. Julia, I really loved kind of the survey methods collection with the kids that you talked about, kind of this idea of like walking with them to the park and having them pick out things. How, obviously that was on a relatively small scale, but how might we think about maybe scaling that out to address some of the data concerns that you highlighted, right? Lack of understanding, especially when working with youth populations. How can we kind of build out some of these cooler, more novel ways of working on data collection with a youth population? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I'll try to answer. I think that we have to really be mindful of who it is that we are working with and how they'll understand the question. So with kids, it's maybe not, we can ask, do you feel safe, do you not feel safe? What makes you feel safe, not feel safe? But there's also the real time of, show me your neighborhood and what in the neighborhood is safe and what is unsafe. And it was really interesting walking with the kids. There were things that they looked at, like broken glass on the ground. They're like, I'm not touching it, so it's safe. And it's interesting to get their perception of how they engage with the environment. And there's other ways to do community data walks. You can regularly engage people to walk around and, maybe they can't take a paper survey. Maybe they don't have an email address. Maybe they can't, over the phone, it's gonna be too abstract, but taking a community member around who maybe doesn't speak English fluently, but still is in the community affected by these issues, and having a conversation. What do you see here? And what is impacting you? What makes you feel safe or unsafe? Is one way, not even with just kids, but also even adults, to address that.
That's great, thank you. Hanae, I have a question for you, because I think about this a lot as a researcher. We put out a paper, we do our study, and then we put it into the world and hope to God somebody reads it, right? We hope that it has some kind of impact. We hope that it does, more than what we can really control. And with the report that you clearly worked very hard on, I'm wondering, how do you think the public can continue to engage, or how can the report kind of live on to continue to be useful now that it's out into the world? How do you see kind of your hopes for that?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of different ways, I'm continuing to share the report through a press release. So I have done a couple of interviews. I've been on Word. I have some things in the pipeline coming up. So, hopefully that's one of the ways that the public can hear about it. I got word recently that the report will be used for the Restorative Justice Certificate Program at CCP. So it will be part of their curriculum. And so future students will be, learning from the report and engaging it, which is amazing. There are a number of other RJ programs locally and nationally that I'm having conversations with about whether I can do workshops or a webinar, things like that with them as well. And so, also conferences and op-eds. And so I think I'm very open to how this will spread organically, but also through how I'm proactively trying to share it out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. It's hard to be able to take something and continue to get press and eyes on it, especially in a challenging news cycle, but I think it's really, really important. Okay, I have one more question, and then we'll kind of move on to the second set of presentations. For Julia, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit. I've known about your work for a little while now, And I've been struck by how you center the importance of, emotional learning and kind of collective support as a tool or a means for gun violence prevention. But I'm wondering if you could just draw that out a little bit more here. In addition to what you told us in your presentation, why is the role of community support and kind of this social emotional learning so pivotal to you for gun violence prevention?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are needed for preventing and reducing violence, but this is one that I really keyed into thinking about an incident of violence that occurs, whether it's gun violence or a different kind. That one incident doesn't stop once that harm is done. It tends to live on in the person harmed or sometimes in the community and beyond that. And I know Hanae's project speaks to this in some ways too, the importance of community to surround someone in the incident of violence and to surround folks before they get to the point of violence is really crucial. There's a study, Adverse Childhood Experiences, that's become more well known in the past few years. And it's been linked with correlations to later health challenges based on things that someone experiences growing up, often violent situations. And the thing is that there's a newer study coming out now, the Positive Childhood Experiences, that's gaining some traction, that shows that various forms of supportive community can neutralize that harm. And so when someone, whether they're young or older, experiences something that is harmful, hurtful, whether it's a racial slur, whether it is experiencing gun violence, whatever it is, if there is already the support there from community for that child, for that individual, then they're less likely to be impacted in significant ways going forward, for it to become trauma. They have that support that they can get past and through that and become resilient through it. And the connection to this with social emotional skills is also, when we're in community and there's conflict and tensions arise, one of the things in our survey is a lot of people mentioning that they feel the violence is getting worse, and right now it escalates from a little fight to a gun being drawn. And so if we are working with our kids early, while their neural networks are forming to lay the foundation of, I know how to take care of myself when I get angry, or when I'm upset, when I'm hurt. I can do these things. I can go to this supportive person. I have these resources. When I have this happen, I can have the skills to navigate that conversation in healthy ways. This is one way we can reduce the conflict and build stronger communities.
Yeah, I love that response because I think it really aligns with a better way of thinking, especially when working with kids, about an asset-based approach to protect against violence and risk in the way that we talk about it very broadly, rather than just a deficit-based approach. What has happened to you that is negative? What has harmed you? And focusing on giving both kids and adults the skills that they need to buffer up against an experience when it happens. So I applaud that, and I think it's fantastic. So with that, I think we will move to our next two presentations. We will give Julia a break, and we'll give Hanae a little bit break. Thank you, Tim. And our next presenter will be Oronde McClain. So Oronde, you can come on up.
Can y'all hear me? Okay. How you doing, everybody? My name is Oronde McClain, and my project was centering the voices of firearm survivor in the media, and we'll get to it. I'll just stay around.
Yep.
Okay. So I started with Bob Pitcher because When I saw this opportunity where it was not a fellowship. This is not a job. It's not a career. This is my life. So I said, oh, I need to do this. This is my life purpose. And living through this pain of being a survivor, and I saw how the media treated me as a survivor. So I wanted to work hard. I wanted to do this. And my fellow cohort was Philadelphia Center for Gun Violence Reporting. So if you hear me say PCGVR, that's what it stands for. Okay, so I collaborated with Cherry Gregg from WHYY on a documentary called They Don't Care About Us, or Do They? Talking about survivors. We raised public awareness and sparked meaningful conversations for every day that people realize what Survivors is about. By sharing my story, I aim to humanize everybody else's story, everybody survivor that is in Philadelphia. And it was a positive change, and it was very impactful. I never saw so many survivors stand up before me. Oh, this went too fast, okay. I also collaborated with another documentary with Temple's very own Professor Yvonne Laddie. We saw the impact, we did the impact on the news media and the trauma of all the families that was impacted, and the communities as well. It sparked national conversations. We traveled cities, states, all around the world to show this documentary. Colleges, they really wanted to know about what we was talking about. And this is the second trauma. This is his own website. In the QR code, you'll see the website. This is premiere. We had our first premiere at Temple. It was very outstanding. All the community, all the survivors, we had politicians there supporting us. I never saw that much impact was dealing with survivors in the communities. So we had this idea. I said, PCGVR is the thought leader, so why not just bring the community and the media together? We had a meeting with the journalists and the community, telling them about this idea I had. It sparked, I dreamt about it. I never knew my dreams could come true. I said, okay, and I had positive feedback from the communities and the journalists. And there you go. Survivor Connection was born. It is a website. It's a platform where journalists can come, and it's a directory of all the community survivors and co-victims that are trained and they ready to be on the news and tell their stories or help somebody else. So when the journalists enter my website, they get a 3-minute video just saying, be compassionate, take care of my survivors. Take your time, be gentle, because everybody hurts survivors, and we're tired of being hurt. Journalists don't understand unless you tell them. I tell all survivors, this is your story. Control your story, take it back. You can control the narrative. This is the map. So the map, I can't do it now, but if you click on it, it will expand to maybe all the zip codes in Philadelphia. So far, we have 157 survivors that's in this platform. This is an example, and I'm gonna show you another example. So, you will have I'm gonna use my example. You'll have my name, you'll have my current role, my email, my phone number, what time I want to be contacted. So, hey, Oronde, somebody got shot at 19141. But Channel 10 only can contact me from 3 to 5 because that's when I'm available. You can't just knock on my door. I'm only available from 3 to 5. Please leave. These are the two people that I praise every day. So I never shared this with nobody. I'm gonna take you to the room of a Survivor Connection class. It's in this building, so y'all part of it a little bit. 10 to 12 and 1 to 3, every month, we take 30 people from the community. It could be a survivor, a co-victim, or an expert. We teach them about media literacy, and that's taught by Professor Elon Laddie, telling them, listen, control your narrative, you know? So media literacy, a lot of people don't know what that is. When a journalist come to me and say, Oronde, how is it? You're on the record. I didn't know what on the record, off the record was. So we teach them that. Public health. Gun violence is a public health issue. We teach them about that. There's 2 videos. And Dr. Jean Wright teach them about trauma. It's a trauma talk. So this is, we've been featured on every channel, across the states, across the cities. I'm waiting for you. So far, it's been 17 news stories. And yesterday, this last 2 weeks, Survivor Connection was used 16 times. 16 times. This is our impact report, and we had a little anniversary. PCGVR is paving the way. If y'all don't know, y'all need to know now. We are really paving the way for journalists, the media, survivors, everywhere. We had a conference a couple weeks ago called What Now? We had 120 journalists from across the nation fly to Philadelphia and attend our 2-day conference. You can see this part of the conference. This is me yapping like I'm always yapping. I got one thing to say, right? Survivor Connection was born to bridge the gap between the media and the communities, right? That's what I was born to do as well. Y'all can join anytime as well. And I got one more thing to say. I know I got 1 minute left. Survivor Connection is already helping journalists center survivors in Philadelphia. But we need Survivor Connection in every city, and it starts now. So if y'all sign up, make it happen. And this is the QR codes. If y'all want to learn about PCGVR and the excellent work we do, or if you want to sign up for Survivor Connection, our next date is November 21st. Sign up now. Oh, this is it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. Is this a little bit better here? Okay. So first I want to thank Stoneleigh, everyone at Stoneleigh, especially Lee for all the support these couple of years. And also to my mentors, Katerina Roman, Judith Levine, and Colin Hammer at Temple University for this wonderful opportunity. So my project has focused on supporting community violence intervention programs and organizations. Let's see which. Oh, there we go. Okay, just want to make sure. Yes. And this project was a wonderful opportunity because I come from developmental psychology background. My research is in children's exposure to violence. So this opportunity allowed me to see from a level of community violence intervention the impact and what it takes, right? What kind of support do organizations need for this type of work, where I've been seeing it at the other end with children's experience with violence. So my project was multi-phased. The first phase was getting to know community-based organizations and what they're doing here, the scope of their programs addressing gun violence. Also, the second phase was to assess needs of the organizations to see really what are the strengths, what kind of support do they need. And the third phase is to develop an online resource website to support those needs as well. So I'll break that down a little bit here. So for the first phase, I reached out and got to know a number of organizations, agencies that are either community-based or city-based to get a sense of, well, what kind of programming do they have? I also talked about how do they understand the gun violence in the communities they're working in as well. So it helped me understand the context and the dynamics. When we talk about gun violence in Philadelphia, this gave me the opportunity to understand really there's some challenges that some communities are facing, but not in others in terms of the driving factors. I also joined and still a member of a CVI coalition here in Philadelphia that's run and led by the Department of Public Health. We meet every month, and we're part of working groups there. So there I've connected to other organizations to see what kind of needs they also have, and also how they're trying to support each other too. I've participated in different CVI trainings as well, so this gives me a sense too of, well, what kind of methodologies are different programs using, and I've also connected to other teams across Philadelphia as well to get to know on a more personal level, really, how do I understand gun violence across Philadelphia? And I've also attended different CVI programming in communities where I've been able to talk to community members there to get a sense of how they thought about the programs in their communities, and just to get a much broader context really from my own work in this project. So this led to some learned lessons here. One is that there's variations in the types of CVI programming and implementation right across the city of Philadelphia. There's also a variation in terms of the populations they're serving, age groups, different types of programming focus. So this gave me really a sense of just really how to understand who's doing what. There's also variations in the type of capacity that organizations have in managing grants, seeking grants, as well as collecting data, as well as understanding the variations, like I mentioned before, in the driving factors underlying gun violence. And really importantly, I want to highlight, it also helped me understand the need and the type of efforts that organizations are trying in terms of connecting with other organizations too. So they talk quite a bit about they can host training sessions for other organizations, or they want to connect to other organizations because of the resources that the other organizations have to offer to fill in gaps within their own programming. So then for the second phase, we took that information. I did literature review on capacity building within gun violence reduction efforts, and we put together a needs assessment survey. And for this survey, it was focused on programs that had a case management or mentoring program. And so in total, we had 37 agencies that are the community-based or city agencies that participated in the survey. 32 of them have a case management or mentoring program. We also had a reduced surveys for those organizations that didn't fit into that criteria but still want to participate. We had 5 additional organizations participating there. And the topic areas include organization and program specifics, the strengths and challenges, program participants, core services that they provide or refer out to as well, We also inquired about the types of partnerships they would like and what kind of anticipated benefits they hope to get from those partnerships too. And this is just an example of one of the items that we asked. We asked them to rank a number of training needs for their staff. I know it's a little small there, but just to highlight the top two bars, at 59%, it was trauma-informed care that they were looking for in terms of training for their staff, and this followed by finding and managing grants. But this is just to illustrate there's a range of training needs that they identified. And so overall, our survey will be on our website that we're developing, but just to highlight a few areas there. The key findings, program participants require access to multiple services and programs. There isn't a one-size-fits-all, right? And there's also overlapping and distinct needs by organizations, including training, funding, housing resources. And there's also a need to build relationships and partnerships and collaborations as well. So that leads then to the third phase in which we're developing our website called Actionable Resources for Change and Violence Intervention, or ARC-VI. And we organized an advisory committee comprised of community-based organizations and city agencies. So we've been meeting bi-weekly to discuss the survey findings and hone in on which areas of capacity building should we start off with on this website that is most needed. And a key function of the advisory committee is to help us with accessibility in terms of language, in terms of functionality as well, and the design of the content that I've been developing in these areas. So this is just one example of a domain of the pages there. So we call it, excuse me, building strong programs. And what this is focusing on what are prominent CVI programs out there that are evidence-based. So we link them to resources in terms of what are some of the impact studies to these programs, toolkits, webinars to help them think through their programming. But we're also building in guidance for those who go onto the website in terms of, well, if you're looking to write a grant and you need to really emphasize the evidence of these programs, here are resources for that. Or are you looking to improve your programming in other areas as well? So we're trying to really aggregate so many resources, including the resources at Temple University that are community facing as well. So we're trying to make it very interconnected within the university to support community-based organizations. And so the next steps from our first iteration is to expand on the resources. So at the moment, we've been organizing in 5 key domain areas, but we're also emphasizing what resources are Philly and Temple-based too, so that organizations here in Philly don't have to search on the website for what is close to them. And we're also going to be inviting the organizations and agencies that participated in the survey to, if they want to be included in the resources page within Philly to connect with others in terms of partnerships and resource sharing. Something that came out of our advisory committee meetings is to create short videos with CVI experts and practitioners in Philadelphia to talk about some of these domains. So for example, we have one page that's going to be on funding and grant writing. And they discussed, well, why don't we do short videos to talk about how do we search for grant writing, for grants? What do funders look for? So try to really make the website more accessible in terms of the information as well. And that allows others to see who is in the CVI ecosystem here in Philadelphia through these videos. And I'll just highlight the last thing is that we're going to look to hire Temple students this coming year, which I'll be continuing with this project, so that if organizations have questions in terms of any areas of capacity building or CVI work, they can maybe submit questions to us at the website, and these students can field those questions and connect them to others who may be able to answer those questions in terms of like practitioners or experts at Temple University too. I just want to thank everyone for this opportunity. It was wonderful, and I look forward to continuing this project. Thank you.
Oronde and Franklin, you guys can come back up. And so we'll get the 2 guys up here, do a couple questions, and then we'll all get together for a full panel. Thank you both for such fantastic presentations. Again, I was familiar with both projects, but it's really cool to see how things have come all together. I want to start with Franklin since it's just fresh on my mind and it's something I think a lot about. So I feel like CVI is in this reckoning moment, right? Where CVI is being talked about more than it's ever been talked about. At the same time, it underwent a huge cut back in April and May with the federal government taking a lot of money back from a lot of CVI organizations. So on the one hand, I think more people are aware of these programs and organizations, but on the other hand, it's harder than ever to kind of get them put together. I'm wondering, based off of what you found, at least in Philly, but maybe even more broadly, how do we think about the next steps of standardizing CVI? You said one size doesn't fit all, and I agree with that, but how do we move from so much variation and variability from one organization to the next to coming up with, whether it's something citywide or statewide, or something bigger that feels more standard across CVI?
That's a great question, because I guess in terms of how do you standardize this type of work, and I would just say from what I've learned through this project, the importance of coalition building. So for the CVI coalition group that I'm a part of, I think it's a great example of how they're trying to work together to understand what resources and approaches do each program have, and how do they help build this public safety ecosystem, right? Because there's so many different needs and dynamics across Philadelphia, age groups, the factors driving the gun violence. So I think in terms of considering standardization in those terms, instead of having just one program model as an idea of standardization, I think the direction, and there's really good examples that I've gotten to know even across the US, is coalition work, right? For they can fill in gaps, work together, address needs, and this goes across the board in terms of conversations on how do we better evaluate our programs? What's a proper way to evaluate our programs? How do we, another topic recently, because you're mentioning funding cuts, is how do we work together to seek funding, right? I mean, to strategize as a coalition rather than seeking funding individually too. And I think that's really the direction of where I've seen a lot of the great work happening.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a tension I know I feel in community violence intervention all the time, is everybody has the same goal, but weirdly enough, people are kind of pitted against one another for dollars in order to keep the organizations running, and that's across the country, but it's also within cities too, and that makes for just a far more challenging, confrontational way of trying to get the work done, which is not a sustainable model probably. Okay, so Oronde, I want to talk a little bit about your experience working with the survivor groups that you've been working with. How did you negotiate kind of engaging with them while making sure that you were, protecting yourself, making sure you were taking care of yourself while also accounting for their needs? What was that process like?
Great question. It was rough. I thought I was going to be like Superman. They ain't survivors. We in this club that we don't want to belong to, but we in it to win it. But it's like all their stories are different, and it's painful. Every single one of them is so painful, and I'm like, oh my God, like I thought my story was worse. Damn, yours is like, you can't compare trauma, but it's like, it was really tough. But I had a great team. Malie was there all the time, Eric, Jim, and they always like, listen, you could do it, but it was like tough. So we had, Dr. Wright. He was there to guide us on the trauma, but it was painful.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's important to have, your colleagues and then people around you to kind of help with that kind of vicarious trauma that comes through this kind of work, and I can imagine how important that must have been. I want to stay with you for a second because I was familiar with Survivor Connection and how that worked, but you mentioned something towards the end, which is thinking about, thinking beyond Philly, right? And thinking about how we could scale this out into a broader kind of endeavor. Do you have plans for that? Are you thinking about how you might move this forward at a larger scale? Selfishly, I'd just love to hear about what you're cooking up.
You on your road with your questions, good brother. I dream about bigger plans. So my plan is to have it in every city. PCGVR is already national, so why Survivor Connection should be national as well. We already have another program, AGVR, so we have journalists in like 38 different cities. I might be wrong, it might be lower than that, but different cities that want to work with Survivor Connection. And I've been in Chicago, Detroit when I was traveling, and we went in their newsrooms and presented Survivor Connection. And now they want to be a part of it. So it's just the logistics. I have to create a manual. That's the next thing. Create a manual so I don't have to be the only one doing it. I can't be in every city. So we'll have somebody from Survivor Connection, if we go national, to teach the same thing.
Yeah, that's such a pain point for so many things in gun violence prevention, whether it's standing up a CVI program or building a kind of database and connection like you are. How do you take the success of one group or one endeavor and make sure that other people can replicate that in the same way? And that's a challenge, but I'm excited to see how that continues to scale out. Okay, my final question is for Franklin, and really this is kind of diving into that very particular pain point around grants and funding with CVI. It clearly, based on the data you showed, was the biggest pain point organizations were having. Did you all come up with, in addition to putting resources online and making things available to groups that might be interested, how do you envision partnerships, whether it's with academics or independent grant writing agencies? Who can help these organizations so that they can get the dollars that they need? How are you thinking about that?
It's a great question. So one of our advisory members is in the Office of Attorney General, Toby Downing, and that's her focus. So she's been so pivotal for us in terms of thinking through what should we be emphasizing in this website to support finding grants. And what she's been strongly advocating for, and what she does in her own work, because she meets with organizations one-on-one, is how to think about strategy. And she's really helped us to hone in on coalition building when you're thinking about, or working together with other organizations to find grants. Because channels for funding come and go over the years, as we see more recently, but it's a challenge not just to provide links to go apply for this grant at this site here, but really, with our content and the information that we'll be providing is how to strategize. What kind of information do funders look for to help them at the level of language, and also guide them in terms of when you're looking at evidence-based programming, how to think through data that you're going to represent, or actually, what kind of data do you have already that could support your proposals too? So it's really, we're really emphasizing ways to strategize for grant writing, whether it's working together on an individual basis, rather than just trying to provide links to different sources of funding, which will change over time too. And also emphasizing the importance of why you should be working with others to seek grants, and also like mutual aid forms of approaches as well, because it goes back to thinking through public safety as an ecosystem, right? You're trying to think who are the other components in trying to come to conditions of public safety, and so why not try to coordinate with them in terms of resources of funding and so forth.
Yeah, I love that approach. I mean, I hear from pretty much every CVI group that I've ever worked with, and funding is kind of number one and most key on their list. So having a strategy approach rather than just, hey, this is where you can get funding, maybe that goes away the next year. I really like that. So our next step is going to be, we are going to bring up Julia. Come on and join the crew, and then we will bring up Hanae, right, Mark, and then I will get into it with everyone. Thank you. I realize I probably could have done that, but I like when you do the tech stuff better. That's right. Plausible deniability. Okay. One question that I've really come up with for every single one of you as you were presenting is, so anytime a research nerd like me writes a paper, at the end of the paper, we have our limitations section, and we talk about the things we wish we could have done, or the things we didn't do as well on, or the challenges that made doing that research hard, right? We try to be as transparent as possible so that people can take that and then know what to do next, right? And so for anyone who wants to respond, I'd love to hear about what your biggest challenge was. While you were doing this project, what did you find most difficult? And kind of a bonus points question on top of that would be, what advice would you have to people who want to continue doing this kind of work for addressing that challenge?
I can start. So maybe because Franklin just was talking, CAGP is one of the orgs new to this CVI work. So before this project, CAGP was not doing intentional violence prevention work. So that's why I put up at the beginning of my presentation some of the different things we were learning ourselves through the process. And that's a messy process to learn as you're trying to fly the ship. And so for the staff involved, because surprise to anyone who maybe doesn't know this, I don't speak Khmer. So I couldn't do any of the Khmer interviews we did. We did interviews in English and Khmer. And so there were staff at CAGP, again, who are here today, who had to do that work. And if they hadn't done it, we wouldn't have been able to include those voices, which meant as I'm learning about, okay, what are we doing? Here's the process. I have to convey that also to the staff who are doing it. And these are new things for CAGP. And so there's this staff capacity and training aspect that goes hand in hand with being able to even do the work with the community to make sure that all the voices who need to be a part of this data and in the room are actually represented. And then it didn't stop there, because once we actually had the data, we got to figure out how to use it, because again, it's all in Khmer. I can't understand it, I can't read it. So then we had to try to translate it and get transcripts and go through the process of professional transcription. And staff capacity for all of this just was very limited. So there was a number of challenges that we faced, both internally in learning what does it look like to do this work, how do we collaborate to do it together, how do we bring the training that's needed and retrain and go over it again and talk more about trauma, and I'm modeling how we make sure that we're aware that if someone in the process of the surveying is starting to shut down, that we can pull back and say, do we need to stop this survey right now? All of these little aspects down to the translation piece to make sure that we were overcoming the hurdles, as I mentioned earlier, of low education levels, functional literacy, language differences, and other challenges.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Yeah, so for this project, like I mentioned before, I'm coming more from a developmental psych background, and my work has been focused in those certain measures. And so this is my introduction to capacity building work. So it was a learning curve for me, and I was very fortunate to have great mentors who, especially Dr. Katerina Roman, who've just helped me guide my work into these areas. And so just even from the survey that we developed, it was a different type of survey that I worked in, so that was also a learning curve. But what I would always suggest to individuals is get as much information about context as possible, because that's informed my work from beginning to end, in terms of not thinking about gun violence as this homogenous thing that's occurring within just even the city of Philadelphia, but really understanding how are organizations, individuals from different parts of Philadelphia understanding and experiencing gun violence, and their thoughts about it too. So that's really informed my practice, and even with the website development too, of the resources as well, right, and constantly building. But I think the takeaway for advice for others is just really immerse yourself a lot more in the context as well, and not just thinking about gun violence as like in statistical manners or just what data is available, but really understanding on the ground as well is pivotal.
I would say the language. I'm a survivor, but when I had the classes, everybody said they was a survivor as well. So I'm like, oh, you're a survivor, you got shot? But I had to sit back and think like, okay, they lost somebody, they a survivor of something as well. So I couldn't get offended by that. And also, it was a lot of emotions in this room. People was crying, they was upset, and I'm just trying to get to the next stuff because we only had 2.5 hours. But it became a therapy session. And it's like a lot of, in my community, Black and Brown community, they don't want to go to therapy. So this Survivor Connection became their therapy. And I had talks with Lee, I had talks with Eric, and I'm like, this is really bad. Because I didn't want them to be on TV and start crying. And it's like, okay, well, Survivor Connection didn't work. So we had to give them more resources. But I feel like if we get the resources first, and then we become a referral Survivor Connection, like Eric always says, we could be a referral service before a therapy session. So they can be already prepared, their trauma can be left at the door. So I think that I need to spend more time with the survivors. I usually talk to them about, mostly every day, but before they get to the session, I give them like an interview. Hey, are you ready? What happened? What's wrong? How long it been? They say, oh, Oronde, I'm fine. It happened 20 years ago. But when Dr. Wright started talking, they bust out crying like it happened yesterday. And it stops the progress because now all the 15 people in the room, they want to share, they want to cry, they want to sigh as well. So now it's like a big therapy session. And I'm like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to do because you can't stop nobody from sharing their trauma. It's like I had to learn that because I let them talk all day, and Lee like, Lou, I gotta go. It's 4 o'clock. So so that's it.
Thank you all for sharing. Hanae, would you like to add anything about your challenges, kind of one of your biggest ones that you faced?
Sure. I guess it's no surprise that getting teenagers to schedule interviews is probably pretty difficult. So to have a 60% response rate was really a triumph and a testament to the relationship that the facilitators maintained with many of them after the processes. But just tracking them down, making sure they had the right cell phone numbers, the right Zoom link, in and of itself was a whole process. That could have been my 2 years trying to wrangle all of them.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question for you all, and this is going to be to impart some wisdom, hopefully. So there are emerging fellows in the room. Could you raise your hand? Okay. And you all are just starting out, right? Okay. So you know who they are. If you had any advice for incoming emerging fellows, whether it's project specific or just how to think about the next few years, the pitfalls of working with Lee, whatever it is. I'm joking, Lee. What advice would you give them, for people who are just kind of starting off with this work and moving forward?
I say communication is the key. PCGVR is good as communication. Lee as well, I ask him all the questions. So it's like you have a separate meeting with Lee and PCGVR, and like Lee really he's really responsible. It's like, hey, I'm gonna protect you. If that's what you want, that's what we gonna get. So that was really helpful. I always felt like my voice was always heard on both sides. It wasn't like my manager was like, you know what? No, you're not doing that. So always communicate how you feel. Like, this is your fellowship. Like I say, this is change the narrative, but this is your fellowship. Like, take all the things you can, even your cohort. Take all the happy hours, all the communications, take it. I mean,
in addition to what Oronde said, use your PD funds and your wellness funds too. But also, I think what's been very helpful in terms of my experiences is that we stayed very focused on our project. There wasn't like no mission creep in terms of expanding or contracting. We were just really focused in terms of how we're going to approach the project. So for instance, even with the survey that we conducted, we could have opened it up to so many types of organizations and programs, but it would have just been overwhelming to knowing that that was just the second phase of 3, right? So we narrowed the focus of the survey so we can get enough information that was pivotal for then the next phases. So I think just keeping that in mind in terms of your project, how to keep it very focused throughout and knowing where it's going to take you.
I'd say 2 years is a short time to get into, learn about, complete a project, and wrap it up. And a lot of us, I think all of us, are continuing on to continue the work. There's always going to be more work to do. And so, as Franklin said, be careful of, what am I focusing on for these 2 years? And this, for this project, but any project as well anyone might be working on, think about your time frame. What are the main goals for that? And take some time through the course of that to step back and acknowledge what you have done so far. Because sometimes it feels messy and slow. You set up a timeline and you're like, we're 3 months behind, and you got to readjust the timeline. And I know for myself, there were times where I was like, we're not at this point yet, so it doesn't feel like we've done the thing. But then you look back and you're like, we have done this and this and this and this and this. So just don't discount the small wins and the steps, especially as you're learning and the org you're in is learning and your partners are all learning and growing together. All of it matters and will take you to where you need to be.
Hannah, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I've met most of, I think, the incoming emerging fellows, but I'll reiterate some of the advice I've probably already given to you, which is it's okay if you don't feel like you quite know what you're supposed to do when you first start. I think it's really important to take the first couple of months to really understand deeply the organization that you're part of and what you're being asked to do before you hit the ground running. And I think that's okay. If I had come in day one saying this is what we're going to do, I would have been sorely disappointed throughout the entire process because so much of it was, moving parts that I couldn't control or a lot of things that I assumed that I knew that I just didn't. So to have a learner's perspective, to approach it very open-minded with curiosity, I think will serve you very well. And to show yourself a lot of grace. Your project and process is not going to look like anybody else's. And so you have to be okay with whatever the outcomes look like for you.
I think that's great advice. So thank you all. I want to make sure we have time to address a couple of the questions that the audience has sent in. So we have 2 questions, and then I will hand it over to Ronnie to close us out. Okay, so the first comes from, please excuse if I mispronounce the name, Sarun, I think, C-A-G-P. What was something new you learned or realized that shocked you within your fellowship that you hadn't known before?
I can start. Thanks, Sarun, for the question. I, as mentioned, prior to this fellowship, I studied the region of Southeast Asia and East Asia. I lived there, I worked there. I had quite a bit of background knowledge coming in, but I didn't know anything about the community here in the States, and especially in Philadelphia. I had gone to the Southeast Asia market because the food brings a little bit of home to me as someone who's lived in the region, and I didn't know CGP and all these other organizations were a part of that. And so it was a surprise to me during my interview to learn how many Cambodian folks live in Philadelphia alone, and the needs related to the community, the history here in Philadelphia. So there was a lot of learning, as Hannah mentioned, right off the bat. of, you know, what's going on here, why does CGP exist, and how CGP is working to meet the needs of the community.
There are two that come to mind. One, the type of ghost guns that are here in Philadelphia. I'd never heard of buying an unassembled firearm before. In terms, I mean, I've worked in different parts of the world, and there's different versions, but like just here, that just sort of blew my mind. Like you can order from factory made, right? That was one. Still scares me quite a bit. The second was just, in my presentation I talked about partnerships, and organization one to seek partnerships, but I've also learned through others here that there are so many partnerships, and there's this sort of deficit, to use those terms, views that organizations are not working with each other, but there's such a strong sense of coalitions among different organizations too that gets lost in the narrative as well. So that was an important element for me to understand in his work too.
I could say a lot of people care, and when you sit back and think, like, I just came from a neighborhood that, like, you know, nobody cared about us, but when you like sit back and think, like, everybody talk to you, like everybody look at you like you're the expert. People really care, from doctors to nurses, researchers. I'm like, oh, a lot of people really think they think highly of what I say. So to the fellows, like, your voices matter. And I never thought my voices matter until like I began with PCGVR. Because, you know, I was just a survivor, and I have no master's degree. Everybody got doctors and master's degree. And like, when I realized, like, oh my God, I could do the same thing. And you have, like, you know, people asking you questions. It's like, you asking me this question? And I really knew the answer. It's like, people really care. So I learned that for these 2 years.
Hanae?
Yeah, I mean, I think I came in with the assumption that, yeah, that restorative justice works, but I was, you know, amazed by just the data of how well it worked. Like, to have 100% of people surveyed to say that they were satisfied with their experience of restorative justice, that they would not only, you know, recommend a restorative justice process, but do another one themselves. Like, those numbers were astounding to me. I knew that they would be positive, but I just didn't know how positive they would be. And knowing that, just the question why, like, why aren't we doing this more? Yeah.
Thank you all for that. Okay, so we have one more question, and this one is actually for Oronde. So this is from TJ Parker. Do you plan to open Survivor Connection up to law enforcement or researchers, et cetera? And if so, how do you maintain the trust and authenticity of the survivors as the project and the platform grows?
That's a tough question. To law enforcement, no. Because the survivors that we talk to, and I trust their word. Just like the journalists and just like the cops, survivors don't trust none of them. It took me 2 years for the journalists and the survivors to connect. So if I ever had to do it with the police, it'd probably take me another 2 years, because I have to feel what they coming from and what they want. Researchers, I'm on the fence to that, because I know a lot of researchers that really do a good job, and they really care. So I'm 50-50 with researchers, but I think I can open it up with researchers. I got to talk to my manager first.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful questions. I will now hand it over to Ronnie to close us out. Thank you again all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you all here. I'm Ronnie Bloom. If I haven't met any of you so far, I'm the executive director. I have the pleasure of being the executive director of the Stoneleigh Foundation. We are so proud of our fellows and all that they've achieved over the last 2 years. Could we just give them another round of applause? Stoneleigh is all about building leadership. Clearly, we have some good material, and we can't wait to see what each of them accomplishes in the future. Also, we're thrilled that they'll continue to be a part of the Stoneleigh Fellow alumni community. We're excited, as you've heard, that we've just recently welcomed our 2025-2027 cohort of Emerging Leader Fellows. I'm going to ask you to stand. Neka Azuka, Jordan Burden, Ashley Johnson, Daria Waite, Akila Walker, and Naire Williams. Thanks so much for being here. Like the fellows you heard from today, our new emerging leaders will also be focusing on gun violence, and in particular on expanding, improving, and sustaining the scale and the effectiveness of Philadelphia's gun violence prevention ecosystem. Finally, I'd like to take a moment for just a few brief acknowledgments. Thank you, as always, to Stoneleigh's Board of Directors for your ongoing incredible support of the foundation and its fellows, and I want to add also the staff. And thank you to the wonderful Stoneleigh staff for organizing this event to showcase the impressive work of our 4 emerging leaders. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge the efforts of Lee Carson, who's been referred to many times today, but now we'll ask him to stand. Lee serves as the program officer for the Emerging Leader Fellowship Program, and he does an amazing job supporting the fellows, as you've heard, and also deepening and expanding the programming that we offer to them. And last but not least, we want to offer our sincere thanks to Dan Semenza for so expertly moderating today's program. Thank you all so much for coming. And we welcome you to please join us in the reception and continue these conversations. Thanks, everyone.
Ooh.